Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another Parent Carer conversation with me, Charlotte Beswick. I'm really excited to be joined today by Nick McDonald. So, over the next sort of 10, 15 minutes, we are going to be sharing, or Nick is going to be sharing, because it's him doing the talking for a change, not me. Um, his journey, his insights, and I have no doubt you're going to get a lot from this. So, thank you, Nick, for joining me.
Okay, no problem.
Can you start by giving us a little, just an outline of your story, your journey, both from the home situation and workplace, please?
Yeah. So if I just talk quickly about my daughter Mia is 10 years of age. Oh, to be 10, sorry, should I say? She'll be 10 in July. She's got an undiagnosed genetic condition, which basically means when she was born, so originally we thought she was blind. She was just blind, and we thought that was just going to be the only challenge she had in life. Unfortunately, she didn't develop as much as what they would expect a blind child to develop, in terms of like where they look at from when she was at Great Ormond Street. And then it was looked into in lots of trying to get diagnosis and all these sorts of things that we've done with Great Ormond Street, and also now predominantly with the Evelina Children's Hospital in London. And basically what that means for Mia in her daily life is she's in a wheelchair, she's blind, she is non-verbal, she's fed for a peg, so she's got lots of different needs, and takes a lot of pretty much 24-hour care between us as parents and school life and things like that. Both myself and my fiance Jo, who's Mia's mum, we both work full time. We both work for I look at is we work for good companies that support us. So Jo works in the NHS. She looks after student nurses and student doctors, sorry, should I say, in terms of their training. And I work for Fujitsu. I've been here for now coming up to 12 years. So right the way from, so like I say, Mia's nearly 10. So Mia was born while I worked at Fujitsu, and I still work here today. So yeah, that's basically my background to my story.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what I found really interesting is when you just said we thought initially that Mia would be blind and that would be her only challenge.
Mhm.
Like for many people, you just go, I've got a blind child on my days. What do I do? But then with
Yeah,
hindsight, you look back and you just think, actually, not taking anything away from the fact that being blind is incredibly difficult at times.
yeah.
But in the context of things, there was so much more for you.
Yeah, and I think we spent a lot of time at the beginning, especially when we were told that they didn't have any diagnosis. We spent, or
Yeah,
me personally, spent a lot of time focusing all my energy and efforts trying to read every book and go on every website and try and find everything we could to try and find a diagnosis or find out what was going on. And then in the end, we sort of basically took a big step back. And even to this day, the way we look at it is actually we probably never will find a diagnosis for it. And my energy and Joe's energy and focus should be on giving Mia the best life possible, not worrying about the diagnosis, because even if there is a diagnosis, it's never going to change anything overnight. So it's everything we do in our daily life and everything, my work and everything that I do is about making sure that the life we give for Mia is the best it can be, rather than worrying about the clinical or medical things that could go on in the background, because that will just happen and we'll never be able to change that, as well. I look at it, really.
I love that. And I think it is hard as well it's a journey, isn't it? That right at the beginning, you really want the answers to all of the questions. But I know I found there just ended up being more questions. I
Yeah,
was looking for the answers and it just generated more unknown, which is really difficult.
yeah. No, it is. It's exactly that. It is exactly that.
Okay, amazing. And how did you tell, if you don't mind answering
Mhm.
this, how did you tell your managers at Fujitsu about your situation? Because I think that's hard for any parent, but I think there is a real stigma around dads in the workplace having these conversations. So how did
Yeah.
you approach that? And how was it received?
Um, I can't actually remember, but I know it wasn't received badly because I probably still wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I remember at the time, my manager at the time was also having he had a child that was at a similar time to when we had Mia. Um, and I think the when I suppose I didn't, there was nothing, I didn't feel uncomfortable about telling them. There was
Okay.
no, I all my managers that I don't work for the same manager now that I had when she was born, although he still works in the business. Um, but all the managers I've always had through Fujitsu have been so approachable in terms of being able to discuss anything with. And I think one of the things that I like about the organisation is the fact that they have that element of trust with me. It's kind of all right. I do work in a sales environment, so I work in sales, so it's kind of it's pretty high pressured,
Hmm.
but they they're always accommodating around if I have to do my forecast calls, and sometimes I've sat and answered forecast calls, sat in a hospital or sat in an appointment, and they have there's no barriers to say, oh, you've got to be here or you've got to be there. They really do, and I think that goes a massive way in terms of trusting people and allowing them to just sort of get on with it, knowing that you're going to do what they need from you, and at the same time allow you to do what you need to do for your family and your child, really. But I don't like so I don't. I suppose I don't. There was no when I told them, there was definitely no sort of, I didn't feel any stigma attached to it or anything like that. It was all very supportive, and even to this day it still is, which I
That's
think is really
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think, like you said about the trust part as well,
yeah,
them trusting you, and equally, they get so much back from you, I would imagine.
and
I mean,
that's
you've been there
exactly it.
12 years, so in terms of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
loyalty and
yeah, yeah.
performance,
And
it,
that's exactly it. And I suppose when you work in a sales environment, it can be quite I suppose it can be quite easy to look at numbers and finances and earnings and stuff like that a lot of the time, and you're quite, I suppose, quite visible in terms of what you're doing. And that's not just to who you work for today, it can be to other employers in the region that might be like looking to get someone on their books or whatever. But actually, it's not just about, for me, it's not just about that. It's that working for a company that sort of trusts me, allows me to do what I need to do. Um, and even to the point where we've had some corporate fundraising days, and Mia has some charity stuff that she's done for particular charities around blind children, and also one for herself, and they've organised charity golf days for her, and like bakes and like cook-offs in the office, and things like that. They really they do really embrace sort of the corporate social responsibility stuff, and I think they're more, but from me, they're more keen to do it for people that are within the organisations if it's helping something in their family, because then they actually see some of the benefits from it a little bit more personally, because they can see what the child's getting, or how the child's developing, or how their employees operate. So yeah, I've never had any it's a great place to work, and the way they support us is fantastic, really.
it sounds amazing. I think with that level of support, I don't know if I'm wrong in doing this, but I always associate that with maybe smaller family organizations.
Yeah, yeah.
And to have that feel in a huge international organization is pretty fantastic.
I think that's possibly the Japanese culture that comes out in the organisation, because we
Okay.
are a people business, and they do believe in making sure that they look after their employees, and um, I remember during COVID, like they gave us all extra days, and I know lots of companies did lots of different things, but I can't remember how many days it was, but we got given like it was either like extra 5 or 10. We were still working through COVID, so we didn't. There was no
Okay.
furlough or anything like that, and they gave us like, because they knew all the kids were at home and not in school. I can't remember how many days. It was either 5 or 7 days extra leave just to help with like the caring responsibilities.
Wow.
And I think it's just little things like that go a long way at the end of
I
the day.
completely agree. Yeah.
Mm.
So, what would you say? having Mia has given you in terms of transferable skills that you bring to your workplace? Being a parent carer, it is challenging, but what would you say are the just three? I know there's tons, but three transferable skills that being a parent carer brings.
Um, I suppose being resilient and knowing how to deal with change is a big thing for me. It's like
Sure.
I've been here a long time, so I've seen lots of change in our organisation, and we have the same thing with Mia. There's a constant change as to whether what sort of symptoms she's showing. She goes through periods of time where she'll be quite settled, and then we might end up with periods of time where she spends. I think it was last summer we were in and out of hospital with her all the time, just purely because she was getting really distressed for no reason, and no one ever could put their finger on it. And it's just being that. I suppose that's one of the things. I suppose there's two things really: just being resilient and dealing with change. Um, I suppose I'm quite. Uh, I can be quite demanding in my work in terms of if I want
Okay.
something being done, because I work in sales. I've got numbers to hit, so sometimes I need support from around the business in terms of getting stuff done. And I think, unfortunately, the world we live in today, when it comes to care and health and things like that, not through any fault of the NHS or through any fault of people. I think there's so much demand on services these days that if you don't be demanding and I say put your foot down in a sort of constructive manner, I
Yeah.
think that you can end up getting really lost in the system. And Joe does a lot of the day-to-day stuff in terms of dealing with our appointments and things like that. But if for instance we had an incident recently where we were not getting any just not getting any response back from some of the consultants, and
Mm.
I then stepped in because I knew like the correct way to deal. I would deal with it in the way I would deal with it at work. I
Yeah.
sort of did it the same way as I would do. I sort of treated it the same way, and
Yeah.
we got a response and we got some help. So and then I think some of the training as well that I've had from being at Fujitsu, from a sort of sales element, in terms of they it was a few years ago we went for a training program around being positive in your life
Mhm.
and always having a positive outlook on your life, and smiling and being happy, and being where I am with Mia. It can be, I always, and I've read some of your bits where you put, I always get told the same thing, I don't know how you do it, and all those
Mhm.
usual statements like I couldn't do what you do and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, and how are you so positive and all that sort of thing. And um, I think some of that from where I was at work, where I've had that training in terms of where they've sort of like made sure you're always smiling and being happy and being positive about what you do. Don't get me wrong, everyone has bad days, right?
Sure.
We all do, and I do, and Joe does, and Mia does, and but I think I sort of live by a motto that every day above ground's a good day. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's just try and keep it smart, and I think that's been transferable for me into being a carer world, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that there's that sort of reciprocal benefit. So your workplace is helping you as a dad,
Yeah,
and actually being a dad adds something to the workplace. So, it's not just one way all the time. The
yeah.
roles help each other. And
Yeah.
what would you say, maybe not to your managers in Fujitsu because they sound like they've got a real great handle on how to support families, but maybe managers that aren't in a culture like that, what advice would you give to them if they want to start supporting parent carers or having those tricky conversations? What advice would you give?
I think don't be afraid to ask someone about, like, I think we chatted a little bit about it right at the beginning, but don't ever be afraid to ask an employee about how things are, and my boss will ask me that if we have a weekly review or bi-weekly review, he'll always ask how are you, and he'll make a point of and they've always done it, making a point of not just work wise. They sort of clearly say how's everything at home, or just really being open and asking about. Don't hide behind it. That's all I would say. Don't be scared to ask the questions, and trust your employees. And I know that's quite hard I work for a great company, but I think sometimes people don't trust people. And especially in this day and age where everyone's working from home and things like that, you've got to instill that. You've got to instill that trust, and you've got to make sure they feel part of the organisation and that they understand where the organisation's going and what the goals are and all that kind of good stuff. You'll understand whether you can trust someone straight away, and you will all, I think, from a parent care or from a carer's perspective that's dealing with their child, that child will always be their number one priority. And
Yeah.
and you've got to allow them some time and just ask them and talk to them and be available for them as well. And if there are times when the child, because it's like with me, we have times where sometimes we'll go, touch wood, we'll go months where we might not have a hospital appointment or have any problems, and all of a sudden something will happen, and it might be a period of weeks where we're in and out of hospital, or different carers coming in, or she can't go to school or whatever for a period of time. It's making sure that during those periods that you give them that space that they need, and that trust and all that kind of good stuff, because ultimately it brings loyalty back from that employee back into the company. So
Yeah, absolutely. Could not have said that better myself. And so important, I think, that people are hearing it, not just from me, from
Mhm.
other people. I think the more we're all saying very, very similar things as parent
Yeah,
carers. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
no
Lots of
problem.
love to Mia and Joe and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and yourself. And yeah, just keep on keeping on as we have to.
yeah,
But we do. And thank you very much for your time. I've really, really enjoyed it.
no problem. Thank you. I've enjoyed being here. Thanks.
Yay.
Cheers.